Hello again. How you doing? This is Dwayne Stradford, TRC NERC Compliance Director, um, and here with a special guest, Mr. Marc Sherman. He's part of our vegetation management team. He's based out of Michigan. Just want to give him a chance to introduce himself. And Mr. Marc, if you can do that right now.
Great, thank you, Dwayne. Again, Marc Sherman. I've got over 25 years of utility vegetation management experience. I'm a utility vegetation management specialist / manager here at TRC, and working with Dwayne on compliance and kind of working with our clients in order to kind of get a better understanding of why FAC 3003-5 is so important.
Appreciate that. And the thing about having this conversation now, which I think is so timely, is the fact that we're going on over the 1-year anniversary of FAC 3-5 being enforceable. It went into effect last year, April 1st. A couple key things that came out of that standard was the retirement of requirement R2, where now there's no distinction between IROL circuits and major WEC transfer paths and just everything else over 200 kV. Everything is now categorized under requirement R1 as it relates to FAC 3 certified circuits. And another thing they did was remove interconnection reliability operating limits, IROLs, from the standard itself. So now major WEC transfer paths stayed in, but IROLs were removed from the document altogether. So I think the one thing too, with it being April, getting ready to be the end of April, going into May, what are why FAC 3 should be on everybody's radar screen about right now?
Exactly, and it's as much about making sure that we have a plan in place in order to kind of, working with clients in order to make sure that they have a plan in place for everything, for all the needs that they have for out in the right of way for vegetation management.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that gets sometimes missing in the scope of things is this is the $1 million a day fine standard. This is like one of the root causes for the big blackout back in 2003. I think before there wasn't a lot of focus on it, where now has been a root cause to one of the biggest, blackouts in the country's history. Now FAC 3 is one of those focal points. And going into the springtime, especially with the summer around the corner, and depending on the acceleration of growth with vegetation, is that something that folks should be really focused in on? Because, with climate change, storms are getting worse, which leads the system more susceptible to vegetation being a root cause of outages. What are some of the things that you think folks should be paying attention to about right now?
About right now, exactly, Wayne. Dwayne, I think there's definitely a lot of major factors when we think about FAC 3, when we think about right-of-way compliance. It's not just about making sure that we follow the program to a T. It's about actually making assessments about what's in the right-of-way. The trees, brush, the conditions, the water, rain, all those things don't care about our schedule. They don't care about did we check this box and do it just right. Trees and brush and everything else are going to grow, and it's about making sure that we have a strategy, a strength and depth program for our clients, that we can actually give them the opportunity to talk about their program, being able to have a very good, robust program in place so that they can actually react to when these situations come up. If it's if we have a longer growing season, that means that we're going to have a longer period of time to manage these right-of-ways. So, and then understanding the conditions of the right-of-way. So it doesn't matter if you're in Texas, Michigan, California, or wherever, trees are going to grow. There are going to be problem areas out in your right-of-ways. There's going to be problem species and trees and situations that need to have a constant monitoring and a contingency plan for how to manage those areas.
Yeah, and when you talk about being out there doing the inspections, and is it just trees that you're looking for, or are there other factors that might be in a right-of-way that might have an impact? And I know we're talking about FAC 3, but I can't help but to think about FAC 8 with facility ratings and how other obstacles or impediments in the right-of-way might have a factor on how we rate different circuits.
Absolutely. And one of the bigger considerations that we always have to kind of put in mind and talk about is basically site conditions. There are going to be situations where, again, if it's unstable soil, even new, let's say new subdivisions are going in, they could actually change waterways. There's and then ways water and water tables can change as well. That could actually impact the way trees grow. Areas where actually we wouldn't consider being swampy areas now are actually wetter. Again, these go back to having the conditions out in the right of way and weather kind of changing. So there's definitely a day-to-day, a year-to-year, month-to-month consideration when we're actually going out and inspecting these areas. Again, it's about having a proactive plan and making sure that we understand not only our right-of-ways, our rights to manage those areas, and what we're actually doing. So are we looking at just doing maintenance? Are we doing re-clear? Are we doing kind of storm prevention work, depending on the situation? Because all those things can come into play depending on what you're looking at when you're out in the right-of-way. Here's a big area where we actually, in Michigan in particular, where I live, yellow poplar is one of our worst trees out in the right of way, where they actually will fail because they're shallow rooted. Any prevailing wind coming out of the west typically will push them over. So I mean, those are things that we would kind of highlight when we're out in the right of way doing our normal inspections, is looking for problem areas, problem species, access issues, working with property owners that typically may or may not want you working in and on their property. So these are all those considerations, are a part of that FAC A and FAC 3.
Okay. And then when you talk about storms and different things that go bump in the night, how have you worked with, because I work with, I've been at AAP, you've been at ITC,
Yep.
We've dealt with that. And one of the things that comes up when you're dealing with storms as well, in a particular FAC 3 circuit might be out of service for an extended period of time, whether it be a week, 2 weeks, a month. Are there certain things that come up where it might make sense to have like an opportunity outage roster laid out from a operations standpoint, just to be able to readily identify, hey, here's a FAC 3 circuit, it's going to be out of service for 2 or weeks plus more, and then you can like notify veg management or anybody else to say, hey, I don't know if you have anything going on this particular circuit, but it's going to be available, it's going to be out of service. If you need to do whatever you need to do on this circuit, now would be a great time to come out and do it.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest components in that, and again, any proactive organization is going to say, how can we integrate these things, right? So it's been my experience when we've had success in those type of situations, Dwayne, it was actually getting people in early on those conversations. It was having a really good, consistent meeting schedule where we can actually communicate and understand what where the maintenance is coming up, maybe the rebuilds or new builds, and incorporating that into the potential, not only the day-to-day work, but hey, how can we actually extend maintenance in some of these areas based on our, again, advantageous, right? Okay, we're going to be working on this line. We're going to actually be reconductoring it, so that's going to be shut down for 2 months. Well, we know that this particular area is a rough spot either to get in, have access to, and then we can actually, a lot of times, utilities can have their veg crews piggyback off of the infrastructure they have in place, be it construction mats or whatever, to get into some of these hard to reach areas and be able to get some of the areas that, again, if it's wet, swampy, even mountainous and other terrain challenges that you'll have, working together will get you a lot further down the road. And again, there's a lot of opportunities out there for kind of working together and getting your program synced up, so you can kind of a win-win your way through a program.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things I always thought was instrumental in improving the compliance programs and folks that I've worked with to help them within their compliance programs is understanding the standard itself, but most importantly, understanding the upstream impacts to that standard. So you look at like FAC 1, which looks at transmission interconnection requirements, and you look at the whole EPC process of the engineering, planning, construction of a facility, and you talk about having that 6, 9, 12-month leadway ahead of a project becoming a reality and being commissioned in service, right as soon as you start kicking off that project. And you just have a simple question or a checkpoint. Is this line over 200 kV? Is this a FAC 3 applicable line? If it is, at that time, before you even break ground or order construction materials, why not make an explicit communication to the vegetation management folks, to the forestry folks, to say, hey, in the next 6, 9, 12 months, we're going to start working on this line. Be prepared to put it in your system and be ready to go. And then that way you have that long lead time, you can prepare for it and kind of go from there. Are those some of the things that you would recommend, or are there other proactive things you would recommend?
I think the most proactive thing you could do is invite your veg team into your engineering meetings. We were able to do that in the past where I've worked, and it paid huge dividends, because again, it's being able to not only understand what from a veg, not only during the pre-construction section, the construction part of it, and the post-construction, even the maintenance, because once that line is up and reconductored, there's this whole maintenance piece that goes on for perpetuity, right, for forever, as long as that line is in service. So having those conversations early and often always is helpful. But embedding your team, making sure that someone from the vegetation team is not only in the conversation, so they can understand where the timing and then some of the challenges that come along with that is crucial in order to make sure that you have kind of what we're talking about here is a very integrated process in order to kind of have a lot, not only again in the front end of the construction piece, but the post construction piece where you're going to have long-term maintenance. So those are definitely having everyone connected helps with all of those pieces.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to mention, because we talk about the understanding of upstream, downstream, but now when we're in the moment, we have our program out there, we have our transmission vegetation management program in place. How do we maintain a high level of excellence in that program? How do we leverage like a GRC tool or some kind of data analytics to like manage and monitor when lines go in service? We automatically set that clock. We know we have 12 to 18 months to do our inspections. We know we got 12 months to do our maintenance on the vegetation line. What do you think about internal controls, and more importantly, compliance awareness dashboards, so that there's full transparency and everybody can kind of manage and be visible and have that situational awareness on those compliance obligations?
I think again, it goes back to transparency. It really does. I'm fortunate enough to have been in the transmission vegetation management world for long enough to watch the evolution of programs, where their approaches were more of a checkerboard approach to kind of transitioning to a very defined, systematic implementation of the integrated vegetation management programs, where again, it is all about making sure that you're out there viewing, looking, inspecting, and then are kind of very cognizant of those timings, those schedules, that calendar that you have in order for either to get maintenance inspections, or again, even if it's once those inspections are done, maybe it is, hey, my program is actually this particular corridor line or whatever you want to call it is in really good shape. I can actually push that for a season or even a growing season. I was fortunate enough to work in Iowa and southern Minnesota for several years, and those corridors had longer work. The cycles were a little bit longer due to the fact that most of it was agricultural. In Michigan and in northern Ohio, where we actually more trees, more in the growing season is just a little bit different. We had to be a little bit more cognizant about how we approached the right of way. So. And then again, having these programs being able to be a lot more systematic and implementing new technologies. We're seeing more and more tools like LiDAR, satellite imagery, being able to kind of not only pick up some of this work really fast and then be able to use this information for analytics, saying, hey, we know that the northern part of Iowa is mostly ag because we flew over it and we don't see anything out there veg related. But there are areas in southern Iowa where there actually are heavily wooded areas. So I mean, they're utilizing the tools that we have and not being afraid to kind of look out there and finding new technologies, new ways to kind of look at the same problem or old problems is going to be a really opportunistic way for you to be able to kind of utilize new information dealing with kind of the same day-to-day problems.
Right. And I know a lot of times companies have that see something, say something, do something approach. Yeah. When you're out there using that level of human intelligence. And one thing that I've always pushed for and promoted for is leveraging existing workflows and existing resources where they are to educate them to understand the importance of, again, this is the $1 million a day fine standard, requirement R4. When you see something, are you aware of the requirement R4 policy that every company should have based on the $1 million a day fine risk that is out there? How do you educate everyone who's in the field who might not be part of vegetation management, but how do you get it to be a corporate structure or a corporate approach to where, hey, look, this is a team sport. We can't be everywhere at all times, but folks in the field are always out there in the field. They go to the substations. Would there be a recommendation, like for instance, when you go to a substation and there's Fact 3 circuits being terminated, just go to, around the substation and look out a span or two from the substation out. Just all that human intelligence driving to and from the substations, being in the substation. How's that approach been? And from a requirement R4, how would you get the word out to folks? How would you get that annual training out there? If you see something, you call the control center so we can take it out of service and mitigate the issue.
For me, I've been fortunate enough to have worked within an organization that took that very seriously. At least once a year, they would have a kind of a brown bag lunch seminar where they would, the whole company would kind of sit in on, and there would be topics that they would discuss. And one of them was vegetation management every year. And so everyone from, the executive C-suite all the way down to the folks who are working in the field every day were kind of got an awareness of what to be looking for when it comes to vegetation management. We would actually get calls from folks driving in the Metro Detroit area saying, hey, I'm driving through this area and I think I see a tree leaning. There was a heavy storm last night. Maybe you should want, this person's kind of a regulatory person, right? They're kind of worried about kind of the, whatever the work that they're doing. But just because they actually had a little bit of exposure to that, they were able to drive down the line and kind of take a quick peek at what was going on in the right of way. And we've gotten a lot of really good tips from that. So again, executive buy-in, the executives understand how important this program is, and then they allow us, the veg teams, to go in and actually give information, be able to share those insights that we have, and actually answer questions when they do come up. So opening up this kind of the communication line in the whole company has been, I think, for the experience that I had, was a game changer.
Nice. And then as it relates to internal controls, it's one of the most understated, underrated approaches to maintaining compliance, right? Leveraging internal controls, especially for the time-based obligations, again, as it relates to your inspections, your veg work, even, I think it's from a requirement R3 standpoint, when you put together your program, who's the author of that transmission vegetation management program? Who's the author of that program? And who has been maintaining that on an annual basis? And again, utilizing internal controls, right? To say, hey, you're on the hook to make sure that you do the annual QA/QC document review, especially when we just had that shift in the standard. We went from Fact 3-4 to Fact 3-5. Is there anybody who's on the hook to make that change and to make sure from a new standard implementation that all the program is shifted to be compliant day one kind of scenario?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, basically any vegetation manager or anybody who is in the asset management group as well, who actually have ownership of those programs, definitely it's incumbent on them to make sure that they've not only have they utilized internal processes, but they're actually looking externally too. How can we incorporate all of these pieces that we have in place and then document it and share it and have it to be recordable and have it to be in a situation where we can not only replicate it here in the company I work for, not only replicate it in Michigan, but Iowa, Minnesota, and all the other states that they worked in. So it is incumbent on them to make sure, or the vegetation managers to make sure that cohesion is in place, the information is shared, that there's, again, buy-in at all levels.
Right. And that's a phenomenal thing for sure. What would you say, just kind of like coming down the end here, closing us out here before too long, is some of the best practices that you've seen over the years? What are some of the words of wisdom you would give to our clients, especially when it comes to potentially engaging with us? What are some of the things where we kind of stand out above the rest?
Well, it may sound very simple and basic, but every organization's have their own challenges. But we've talked about it multiple times, and it's been something I've witnessed firsthand for a number of years, and was able to really kind of see the value in it. It was communication, it was integration, it was consistency in not only funding, but consistency in the level of importance for the utility, and being able to bring in partners who can not only find and work with them in order to kind of get these, and make sure these priorities are illustrated and recordable. Again, it's the top-down approach. If it's important at the executive suite, it's going to be important all the way down. So having that approach and making sure it's sustainable, not only for now, and especially if it's a pre-audit time, but post-audit time, right? So that, we're not only trying to do all this work to get ready for an audit from NERC, FERC, but we're actually going to be able to do this in practice out in the field every single day. So we don't have to worry about when those audits come up, because we've been consistent. We know that collectively we're doing this as a team.
Right. And I think that was the one thing where we just recently worked on an audit readiness engagement in the MPCC area, where did a great job of reviewing the Fact 3 documentation, the RSAW, the accompanying evidence, the inspections, the veg cuts. And I think that's one of the things, if we can instill in our clients as far as audit readiness, is never take for granted that you're always going to be ready for the audit. You also have to be very methodical and strategic on keeping up with all that audit evidence, because it can get out of hand real quick the minute you take a week off or a month off and think, well, the audit ain't another year or two away. But you still got to stay very rigorous on keeping all that information up to date.
Yeah, data consistency. It's not only, I know it's probably so prevalent in probably on the construction and all the other components that comes along with work, managing a utility, but the vegetation is no different, right? The systematic approach, the data management, having a clear path and a clear vision of what you want in your program is vital.
Yeah, and it seems like when you get a handle on thresholds, like a lot of it is low-hanging fruit. I mean, this is
right.
Like it's just pure math. I mean, you have a date in here. The minute you start creeping up on that 12 and 18-month encroachment of missing your deadlines, having something honk at you saying, hey, you got a month left, you got 2 weeks left. And I think having that visibility in the data and the awareness and then the communications off of that really helps to keep you out of harm's way.
Absolutely. No one wants that doomsday clock ticking. It's like they got that thing on the wall. It's like tick, tick, tick. Here comes the audit. No, being able to kind of utilize the information, having all the internal controls, having all the information readily available. So when it comes time, you can even do, with always this perspective that, I'm going to have to defend my decisions every day out there, and not only how I spend ratepayers' dollars, but how I get the maintenance, managing contractors to getting the work completed on time and on schedule and on budget. All of those things are part of the program management, but they all play a part in making sure that the reliability is out there for the utilities. Ultimately, it is make sure the Fact 3 is going to be like relevant for us, for any utilities. Like if you put all these pieces together, you're really going to reduce the risk of outages.
Right. And the good thing about this, with this all being proactive work that we're doing, it's a regulatory obligation. So of course we do get, or the companies, our clients get recovery for all this work that we're doing on their behalf proactively. But we know what the negative consequences if we do have a negative compliance outcome. Fines come, they go against the revenues, there's no recovery, so there's an immediate hit to shareholder value. So the importance of being proactive and getting that recovery and understanding that investment, that we're helping them out on the front end, really goes a long way to shareholder value.
Absolutely. And maintenance is maintenance, right? So you in the substations, we're maintaining the equipment. Out in the right of way, we're maintaining the towers and conductors. And even in the offices, we're making sure that we have the most appropriate, up-to-date programs and softwares in order to make sure that there's again, there's the ability to continue to do work. Well, it's no different for the vegetation management out in the right of way. It is making sure there's consistency, that we're doing the same thing, that we're staying on top of what we need to be doing in order to have that long-term reliability that I think truly is what all utilities, bulk carrying utilities, want. They do not want to go through the process of actually having NERC in their backyard, looking at what they're doing, digging through their documentation. No one wants to be in that scramble.
Right. And I think you hit it on the head. I mean, connecting the data to real world implications. When you know what the impact of that data is on your day-to-day operations, safety, reliability, financial viability, being able to keep those corridors actively energized, that might be flow gates for a lot of energy going down those paths. I mean, everything in Fact 3 is 200 kV and above. So again, there's carrying a bulk power to and from major load centers. Now with data centers popping up everywhere, I mean, it's so critical to keep these lines up and actively going. So, but yeah, are there any other final thoughts you can think of before we call it good for today?
It's the future, right? When we think about what the landscape is going to look like for the energy consumption in the U.S., it's the number one thing that they identify is transmission. Taking, you can have all of the windmills and the solar out there all over across the U.S., but if you don't have the infrastructure to take it from point A to point B on those transmission lines, that's been the number one factor of actually developing green energy, having sustainability, having grid resilience, is building more infrastructure. And the more you build, the more likely there is going to be issues when it comes to vegetation management and Fact 003-5.
Words of wisdom to live by, for sure. Well, Marc, man, as always, I appreciate your time.
You too, Dwayne.
The conversation. The words of wisdom, as always. And again, from a NERC compliance standpoint, from a veg management standpoint, TRC is here to help serve your clients' needs. We're always available. We're also on LinkedIn as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to us individually or on our team site. So thanks for the time, Marc. Appreciate the words of wisdom as always.
I love talking about vegetation management. So that's definitely my wheelhouse. Thank you for letting me, talk about it. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And like I said, it's been great working with you over these last couple of months. And like I said, I understand your passion about what you do, which makes it that much more enjoyable to have this conversation. So we got plenty of work to do. Hopefully more coming through. So we look forward.
We're ready for it. I mean, we're positioned to help people with these issues.
That's the key. We're here to help. We got years of experience. We've been in the trenches. So just looking forward to it, man.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dwayne.
All right. Appreciate you. Take care.